This is my entry for Clip Studio's monthly tutorial contest. Today, I'll be covering the topic of plants and walking you through drawing trees, leaves, flowers, and grass strands. I suggest checking out my Clip Studio article, linked in the description below, as I detail all information in a step-by-step method via still images. It's great for those who like to take their time and really soak in the information. We're going to begin with drawing an oak tree. First, sketch a rough outline for where your tree bark and most visible lower branches will sit. Use the color for your line art that will blend well with your future base color. Next, fill in the base by creating a new layer and coloring beneath your line art layer. Then, merge the line art with the base color for easy blending. Step 3. Paint in the leaf base for easy filling. Create 2 new layers for the leaves, one placed above your tree trunk layer and one placed below it. Step 4. Start creating depth on your tree leaves by outlining the edges of the leaf bundles loosely. They should start towards the tree trunk and work their way outwards. Step 5. Highlight the tops of the individual leaf bundles. Start to blend in your colors and create leaf texture around the edges of the leaf bundles. Step 6. Continue to blend in the colors and highlighting the tops an even lighter color. You can see that I'm sort of darkening the colors as I go. No need to worry about messing up, you can just paint right over it. Building up the layers helps a lot. Now, step 7. On tree trunk layer, define the panels of the tree's bark. Blend this color with the original shade used to imply additional shadows. Step 8. Further apply emphasis on the tree trunk's panels by darkening the edges and using a brighter, warm tint of color for highlight. Grab a lighter tint of green and add pops of additional highlights on the top of the leaf bundles in the tree, and some darker value colors to the branches of the tree leaves to add further contrast. As you can see here, I'm starting to draw a few extra branches that are poking through the leaves. Now, on step 9, for the final step, go to Layer, New Correction Layer, Hue, Saturation, Luminosity, and make color adjustments to your tree until it's the correct shade as commonly seen for the species. Next up on our agenda is drawing aspen. As aspen trees are primarily whiter in color, make sure your background isn't too light that it would wash out the tree itself. Then, on a new layer, create the narrow outline of your tree. A characteristic of aspen is the dark spots that stand out on their primarily light bark. Add in some spots or dashes to give your tree character. Step 3. Loosely make the outlines for your leaves. Due to the small, rounded leaf shape and often lesser quantity of leaves that the tree holds compared to some like the oak tree, the aspen's leaf outline should be spotty and less plentiful. Step 4. With a lighter color, dot in where the highlights will hit your tree from its light source. The dots will also help signify individual leaves. Step 5. Using a darker color, dot in your shadows beneath your highlights and at the bottoms of your leaf bundles. Like with the highlights, use dots rather than broad strokes to better indicate the textured surface of your aspen. As this tree has its leaves turning yellow for autumn, add in some falling leaves to make it more realistic to the season. Taking into consideration the location and surroundings of your aspen, use a color that complements the light source and ambiance to make shadows on your wood. Step 8. To allow my aspen to stand out even further, I go in with a light cyan and a layer behind the bark and paint roughly around the leaves. I then use a deep red to make the shadow that the tree is casting on the ground. Grab a dark, near black shade next and better define the edges of your aspen. Finally, use the tone curve via layer, new correction layer, tone curve, and create any color adjustments as desired to make the image more vibrant. Originating in China but spreading throughout the world with over 400 different species, next we have the willow tree. First, draw the outline for your tree trunk. A majority of the trunk will often be obscured by the willow's draping leaves, so no need to get too detailed with the outline yet in its early stages. Step 2. Place the general shape of the leaves on a new layer above the tree trunk and a new layer below the tree trunk for easy filling. Some erasing will occur on the leaves to clean them up later and refine them, so having these in their own layer can save time. Step 3. In a darker color, mark the general outline of each leaf bundle. Willow's leaf bundles fall vertically, unlike many trees. Step 4. Select the gradient G tool to foreground to transparent, lock your leaf layers, and make the bottoms of the leaves darker. This will help apply depth to the tree. Step 5. If your tree is getting too lightly colored, don't worry. Use the Hue, Saturation, Luminosity layer correction to decrease the luminosity. This will make highlighting much easier later and place stronger emphasis on the soon-to-be-added brighter values. Step 6. It's time to work on detailing the individual leaf strands. First, start with a mid-ranged colored shadow for the strand facing away from the light. Work your way down, making the shaded strand like a frayed rope. Second, obtain a brighter color to use on the side facing the light source. Repeat the process, but with this color and on the opposite side as the first step. Next, using a new darker color, decrease brush size slightly and place more attention-grabbing shadows to add additional contrast between the lights and darks. Step 7. In a new layer set to overlay, obtain a warm color and an opposing cooler color to make lighting effects. Now you're done with your oak tree. The next tree we'll be drawing is the pine tree. In a darker muted brown color, draw a singular line that tapers off at the top. The bottom of the line should have a thicker width than the top of the line. This will be your pine's tree trunk. Step 2. Obtain a muted green color and in brisk, fluffy strokes, make the pine needles outlines. These should circle around your pine trunk and obscure it to some degree. It may help to think of these shapes as horizontally stretched clouds. Step 3. With the darker muted green, give the leaf outlines volume by applying shadows to the bottoms and randomly around the centers of the clusters. Step 4. Use a lighter tint of green to create the highlights of your needle outlines. This should be done at the tops of the individual leaf clusters and randomly around the centers. Step 5. In a darker shade than used during Step 3, further define the shadows of the tree on the opposite side of your light source. Step 6. Let's make the individual needles more prominent by using a lighter highlight to form rounded spikes within the leaf clusters. Dot a few rough, oval-shaped highlights occasionally in the shaded regions to signify strands that are sticking out from the shadows. Add highlight and detail to the trunk of your tree as well. Did you know there's 101 species of pine tree, with the plumage, needles, and color varying significantly from tree to tree? Pine trees can be found across the world and are highly versatile. Some varieties, such as the Scotch pine and red pine, surviving even in average cold temperatures of -50 degrees Fahrenheit. Pine are evergreen trees, which means they will retain their green state and leaves year-round. Step 7. To form further lighting, make one new overlay layer above everything and clip it to your leaves. Picking a warm, bright color, use the gradient G tool set to foreground to transparent and make a smooth ray of light on the side of the tree your light source directly hits. Then, on that same layer, use a cool color to make a ray of shadow from the opposite end. Time to begin the leaves. These are great for close-ups and foreground subjects. Step 1. Start with a narrow branch and stem outline. While the branch itself may have some thickness, the center leaf stems are quite thin the further down you go. Step 2. Make a new layer above Step 1. On either side of the stems drawn in Step 1, make brisk leaf strokes, starting at the top and going downwards. Step 3. Lock your leaf layer. Now, grab a lighter color and use the gradient G tool on foreground to transparent to make the bottom of the leaves lighter. This will create a sense of depth. Step 4. With the darker color, proceed to add shadows to the leaves. The shadows will be most prominent on the leaves facing away from your light source. Step 5. In an even darker color, add additional shadows closest to the center stems. The weeping willow got its name due to the resemblance of tears that raindrops have when falling from its branches. Step 6. Using a bright highlight matching your light source, create gloss on the leaves and branches where the light directly hits it. This will be at the highest point of the leaf or branch. Step 7. Make a new layer above everything set to overlay and clip it to your leaves. Go in with a bright, warm color to form additional lighting effects. Repeat this for a new multiply layer, using a darker, cool color for shadow effects. If your branch is lacking in the amount of leaves that you would like, duplicate your leaf layer after merging all leaf layers. Then, select Ctrl-T to transform and edit as you please so that you have additional leaves. We'll be drawing the pine branch next. First, draw a rough, uneven outline for your branch. Rather than a smooth straight line, ensure the form is coarse and has textured edges. Next, using a dull green, make individual strands jutting out from your branch. The ends of the strand should be rounded to some degree, rather than sharply tapered. Vary the length of these strands throughout the branch so that they are uneven, with some of the smallest noticeable at the base of the branch. Step 3. Lock your Step 2 needle layer and make shadows on the individual strands using a darker color. These shadows are most evident close to the base of the branch. The ends of the strand should generally not be shaded, as they are often the highest point and reach the most lighting. Step 4. Texture your branch with a darker color. This texture can easily be applied by zooming in closer and making rough, uneven C shapes down the entirety of the branch. Step 5. Apply additional shadows to the individual needles and add highlights to the branch. Gloss is also starting to be placed on the ends of the individual needle strands. Step 6. Darken branch shadows and brighten the gloss effects to give further depth and contrast to the form. In elevations from 8,000 to 10,000 above sea level, aspens will begin changing color for autumn from mid-September. Most trees will lose their vibrant colors and many of their leaves after intense snow or wind. Pine are evergreen trees, which means they will retain their green state and needles year-round. They are also coniferous, which means they can produce by sprouting cones from their branches to protect their seeds. We'll be drawing the aspen leaf. Step 1. Begin with a somewhat symmetrical outline of your leaf. Aspen have uneven edges and take a circular teardrop shape. Step 2. Use a lighter color to create a manual gradient starting from the bottom of your leaf. Step 3. Using a combination of a reddish hue and a yellow, add texture to the center of the leaf and outline some of the edges. I use the Fragile brush X for this step, as seen with many of my tutorials. Step 4. Draw the veins of your leaf and its stem. It helps to zoom in closer to your leaf with this step so that you can easily see what you're drawing. Rather than perfectly straight veins, apply some degree of curve and uneven width to best achieve realism. Step 5. Further texturize your leaf with the dark reds and bright yellows. I apply a deep red to the top of the leaf to counter the yellow bottom. Step 6. Make the vein of the leaf stand out with apparent volume by closely shading the vein on the side opposite to the light source. Then, with a brighter color, add gloss along the vein where the light will hit it. Step 7. On the Add Glow layer setting, I place the overall leaf gloss closest to my light source and where the light will most reach. Step 8 through Step 9. Finally, go to Layer, New Correction Layer, Tone Curve, and make color adjustments to your leaf to make the colors more vibrant and lifelike. Now you're done. Finally, we have the oak leaf. Begin with the outline of your leaf. It should be somewhat symmetrical, though it is not necessary to make it perfectly symmetrical. Step 2. Lock your base color layer and draw on top of it, or create a new layer and clip it to the lower base layer. Then apply overall highlights closest to where the light source is coming. Leaves are often curved to some degree when attached to a tree in nature, instead of a flat surface, so keep this in mind when coloring. Step 3. Blend in the highlight using a textured blending brush. Step 4. Using a darker color, start drawing the leaf's veins. As this oak leaf has considerable curve to its surface, the veins follow the curve of the leaf to help indicate this. Step 5. Using a light pop of green, add more pronounced highlights to where the leaf is most exposed to light. This is generally the most elevated parts of the leaf. Step 6. As our leaf has depth to it, we'll select a darker shade of green and add in shadows on the side of the center vein not facing the light source. Step 7. In a bright color, zoom in so that you can see your leaf's vein clearly, and add individual highlights and glossy effects along the vein and stem. Step 8. Add additional emphasis to your light source by creating a new layer above everything set to overlay, clipping it to your base layer, or using Ctrl plus clicking base layer to select only your base layer, and using gradient G on foreground to transparent to make a smooth ray of light. Repeat this step from the bottom of the leaf with layers set to multiply and a darker color to get your smooth shadow. We'll next be doing orchard grass. Step 1 through 3, start with the outline for a few of your grass leaf strands. Gradually build up the number of strands. Notice that the grass is not perfectly straight lines. It has curves and varying width to it to indicate natural growth and dimension. Step 4. Make individual diamond shapes along Step 3's stem ends. These outlines will help visualize the placement of the seeds later. Step 5. Fill in the diamond shapes made during Step 4 and use a brighter color to add dots of highlights along the side facing the light, and a darker color to make dots of shadows on the opposite side. This should be done roughly to form the texture of the seeds. Orchard grass is common for use in pastures due to its safe consumption for all varieties of livestock. This species also works well for erosion control due to its extensive roots. Step 6. With a lighter and darker color, begin defining the individual grass strands, highlights, and shadows. Step 7. Bright pops of highlights add gloss at the highest point of the leaves and seeds, while dark shadows begin to better define the individual strands at their most shaded points. Step 8. Setting a new layer above everything to overlay. The tops of the grass strands are smoothly colored in a warm hue for additional lighting effects. Step 9. If your grass is lacking depth, apply a tone curve via layer, new correction layer, tone curve, and increase the overall contrast of the plant. Step 10. To quickly achieve a different color for your seeds to better distinguish them from the rest of the grass, make a new layer set to color and clip it to your lower layer seed. Next we'll be drawing the bellflower. Start with the flower's curvy stem. Then, make the bell-shaped outline for your flowers at the ends of your stems. Form the outline for your individual petals by adding onto the bell shape. After, in a lighter color, make textured highlights on your flower. Next, using a darker color for the shadow, Define the bottoms of your individual flowers to create depth. Now, detail your shadows more to give the flower additional texture. Continue building up the shadows and work on shading and highlighting the stem. The Campanula, known as the Bellflower, often symbolizes gratitude, humility, attractiveness, and everlasting love. It can often be seen planted on graves due to its association with death. There are about 300 different species of Campanula, ranging in shape, size, and color. Blue or purple tends to be the most common color. This flower is a perennial, meaning it lives for 2 years or longer. It generally begins blooming in June and lasts until frost occurs. Finally, bright pops of cyan are used to bring attention to the highlights of the flower. These highlights are found at the highest part of the flower's circular base. The stem also receives some gloss effects. For our final tutorial, we'll be going over roses. Originating in China, the rose has made its way across the world as a symbol of love and passion. It comes in a variety of different colors and often has thorns along its stems to deter consumption from animals. Begin with the line art you created during the rose outline segment. Make sure the color of the line is a darker shade of what your flower's base color will be. Step 2. Fill in the outline of your flower with its base color. You can easily fill in line art in Clip Studio by using Magic Wand, click outside your line art, and invert selection. On a new layer below your line art, select Fill. Step 3. Blur the line art with a blur tool. Using a textured blur tool may help. Step 4. Add shadows to the edges of the petals. The center of the flower will often be darkest, as the petals are especially close together. Step 5. Further build up your shadows with an even darker value. Redefine the outline of the petals if it's getting too blended. Step 6. With the light color, add highlights to the highest point on your petals. Defining the edges of the petals now using this brighter color can also help add contrast and separation. Step 7. In an even darker color, zoom in closer to your flower and further define the edges of the petals while creating more detailed folds and curves in the shapes. Step 8. If your image is getting too dark or too light, or you're having trouble bringing out the contrast between lights and darks manually, now is a good time to do a tone curve to make it stand out. To do so, go to Tone Curve via Layer, New Correction Layer, Tone Curve. Step 9. If your flower is looking too bland and uniform, consider adding more interesting color and vibrancy by making a new layer set to Color, clipping it to your below flower layer, and blending in a few more saturated values. Step 10. Make 2 new layers clipped to your lower layer, one set to overlay and one set to multiply, to create further pops of light and dark. Darkening the center of the flower as needed is easy to do with the multiply layer now. Step 11. In a new layer above everything, clip to your flower layer. Use your Gradient G tool on foreground to transparent mode and make rays of light on the top of your flower and a casting shadow on the bottom. Step 12. For additional effects, try adding some particles from the Battlefield Dusts brush, as linked in my article in the description, on top of your flower. Now you're done drawing the rose itself. Time to move on to the background. For a simple background, grab your Frijol brush X and on a layer below your flower, begin making a shadow on the canvas. Blend this shadow around its edges if you'd like with the Frijol Blur 1. Next, on a new layer above everything, add splashes of bokeh with the bokeh brush, as linked in the description article. Then set it to the Glow Dodge layer setting. We're finally done!